dominance accords had governed interspecies relations for approximately 9,000 standard years, which was impressive considering that most governmental systems collapsed under their own bureaucratic weight long before they hit the 4,000-year mark. The accords operated on a principle so simple that even species without verbal language could understand it. If you can beat someone in a fight, you get to tell them what to do. It was democracy for people who thought democracy took too long and involved too much talking. Every species in the Confederation had a ranking. The rankings determined everything from trade priority to territorial claims to who got the good parking spots at diplomatic functions. You moved up the rankings by winning fights in designated combat zones called proving grounds. You moved down by losing fights, or, in rare cases, by failing to show up when challenged, which was considered the same as losing, but with added humiliation. The system worked remarkably well, mostly because species that were good at fighting tended to be less good at the kind of abstract thinking required for elaborate political schemes. They could hit things very hard, which solved most of their problems, and when hitting things didn't work, they hit things harder. It was straightforward, honest, brutal, yes, but at least you knew where you stood, even if where you stood was underneath someone bigger stepping on your head. At the top of the rankings sat the Vrin Collective, a hive mind species that had evolved on a planet where everything, including the plants, actively tried to kill you. They had exoskeletons that could shrug off plasma weapons, redundant organ systems that made them nearly impossible to kill, and a complete lack of individual self-preservation instinct that made them terrifying in combat. They'd held the top spot for 600 years and showed no signs of relinquishing it. At the bottom, freshly inducted and still figuring out which way was up in galactic politics, sat humanity. Humans had joined the Confederation 32 years ago after their first faster-than-light vessel had stumbled into Confederation space and nearly caused a diplomatic incident by accidentally broadcasting episodes of something called reality television on frequencies reserved for emergency military communications. The confusion had been sorted out eventually, though several species still harbored suspicions that reality television might be a form of psychological warfare. Humanity's ranking in the Dominance Accords was 471 out of 473 species. The only species below them were the Plix, who were sentient clouds of gas that couldn't physically interact with solid matter, and the Hern, who were technically classified as sentient, but spent most of their time being philosophically opposed to the concept of violence, which made their proving ground matches extremely boring to watch. Humans were weak. This wasn't opinion or bias. It was measurable, fact backed by comprehensive biological analysis. Their bones broke under pressure that other species considered a firm handshake. Their skin tore if you looked at it with sufficient disapproval. They required a remarkably narrow range of environmental conditions to not die. And even within those conditions, they could still die from an impressive variety of causes, including, but not limited to, eating the wrong thing, drinking the wrong thing, breathing the wrong thing, getting too hot, getting too cold, being too stressed, or occasionally just because their bodies decided to attack themselves for no apparent reason. By every reasonable metric, they should never have made it off their planet. The fact that they had was considered either a statistical anomaly or evidence that the universe had a mean sense of humor. The Sigma Proving Grounds occupied a retrofitted space station in neutral territory, roughly equidistant from the territories of the 6 major power blocks that dominated Confederation politics. The station had been purpose-built for sanctioned violence, which meant it had medical facilities that could resurrect someone from technically deceased structural reinforcements that could withstand small nuclear detonations, and an arena that could be reconfigured for different environmental requirements in under 10 minutes. Currently, the arena was set to standard Confederation baseline. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, 1 standard gravity, temperature maintained at 293 Kelvin. Boring, but functional. The kind of environment that the majority of species could tolerate, even if they didn't prefer it. The dispute being settled today involved mining rights to an asteroid field in the Keller sector. On one side was the Torvak Mining Consortium, represented by their species' reigning combat champion. On the other side was the Mexian Trade Alliance, represented by their champion. Both champions were currently in the arena. Both were massive by human standards. Both had natural weapons that could punch through starship hulls. And both were taking this very seriously because mining rights in Keller sector were worth approximately 40 billion credits annually. Watching from the observer's gallery, carefully positioned in the section reserved for species ranked below 400, was Lieutenant Commander Jenna Cray of Earth's Expeditionary Diplomatic Corps, which was a deliberately impressive title for what amounted to person we send to watch aliens do things so we can learn how not to accidentally insult anyone. Jenna was 34 standard years old, stood 170 centimeters tall, weighed 68 kilograms after breakfast, and had spent the last 12 years of her life learning increasingly creative ways to hurt people who were bigger than her. Which, given that she'd grown up with 4 older brothers on a space station in the Sol system, was basically everyone. She had dark hair currently tied back in a regulation bun, dark eyes that missed very little, and the kind of compact, efficient build that came from a lifetime of understanding that muscle took energy to maintain. And energy was a resource you didn't waste. She wore Earth's diplomatic uniform, which looked professional and completely failed to convey that she held black belts in 3 different martial arts and had instructed close-quarters combat at Earth's Special Operations Training Facility for 6 years. The Torvak champion won the match in 4 minutes by literally throwing the Mexian champion through one of the arena's reinforced walls. Medical teams rushed in to retrieve the loser's body before it could finish dying. And the Torvak delegation made triumphant sounds that their translation matrices struggled to render into anything other than "out," victorious screaming. Jenna made notes on her datapad. Torvak physiology, dense muscle structure, high pain tolerance, favors grappling and throws. Weakness, slow recovery time between major exertions, relies on overwhelming initial force. She'd been doing this for 3 months, watching matches, cataloging fighting styles, building a database that Earth's military and diplomatic corps used to understand how the rest of the galaxy approached combat. The arena cleaned itself, medical teams departed with the loser, and the next match prepared to begin. This one was different. This one was a challenge match, which meant someone was trying to move up the rankings by calling out a higher-ranked species. The challenger was a Vorath named Krelthax, which in his language meant something approximately like "he who breaks mountains," though the translation matrix rendered it more literally as "stone smasher," with a footnote about cultural context. He stood 3 meters tall at the shoulder, mass somewhere around 400 kilograms, and had evolved on a planet where the gravity was 2.3 times Earth standard. His species were apex predators who'd spent their evolutionary history hunting prey that could fight back, which had given them armored hide thick enough to stop projectile weapons, 6 limbs that could each bench press a small vehicle, and a regenerative system that could regrow lost limbs in a matter of weeks. The Vorath were ranked 47th in the dominance accords. They'd been as high as 23rd, but a series of losses to species with energy weapons and better tactical coordination had dropped them down over the past century. Krelthax was attempting to reverse that decline by challenging a species ranked 41st, the Drexian hegemony. Except the Drexian champion had apparently decided that the mining rights weren't worth the risk of losing to a lower-ranked opponent, which meant they'd withdrawn from the challenge. This was legal under the Accords, but resulted in an automatic rankings adjustment that dropped the Drexians down 5 spots and moved the Vorath up 3. Which meant Krelthax had just won a fight without fighting, and he was standing in the arena looking extremely unsatisfied about it. Jenna watched him pace, all 3 meters and 400 kilograms of frustrated warrior, and recognized the body language. She'd seen it in training, in her brothers, in herself when a sparring partner hadn't shown up. The need to hit something, to prove yourself, to validate all the preparation and psyching up you'd done, only to have the target vanish. She should have looked away, should have kept her head down, should have remembered that she was here to observe, not participate, and that Earth's diplomatic corps had been very clear about not drawing attention to humanity's presence. Krelthax's eyes swept across the observation galleries, looking for something, anything, to salvage his moment. They landed on the section reserved for low-ranked species, swept past the Plix, who couldn't fight anyway, and the Hern, who wouldn't fight anyway, and stopped on Jenna. The temperature in the station seemed to drop several degrees. Human. Krelthax's voice boomed through the arena's translation system, rendered in a dozen languages simultaneously. I see you watching. I see you taking notes like a scavenger documenting the kills of real predators. Several species in the observation galleries made interested sounds. Humans were still novelties in Confederation space. Most species had never actually interacted with one in person. This was entertainment. Jenna very carefully did not react. She kept her expression neutral, her body language relaxed, and continued making notes on her datapad as if she hadn't heard him. Your species ranks 471st, Krelthax continued, warming to his theme. Below species that cannot touch solid matter. Below species that refuse to fight. You are observers because you are too weak to be participants. You watch because you cannot do. A few species made sounds of approval. The Vorath delegation, sitting in their section, made clicking sounds that the translation matrix rendered as laughter. Jenna looked up from her datapad, made eye contact, waited. Earth sends watchers to learn what it means to be strong, Krelthax said, his voice carrying across the arena with the kind of projection that came from lungs the size of engine blocks. But watching will not make you strong. You are prey pretending to be predators, scavengers pretending to be hunters. Your bones break from impacts that my people use as massage therapy. Several more species joined the laughter. The Torvak, fresh from their victory, made rumbling sounds of agreement. Even some of the mid-ranked species seemed amused by the spectacle of the mighty Vorath warrior, mocking the galaxy's weakest members. Perhaps, Krelthax continued, and Jenna saw where this was going about 3 seconds before it arrived. Perhaps the human observer would like to stop observing, would like to step into the arena and learn firsthand what strength means. The arena went quiet. This was no longer mockery. This was a formal challenge under the dominance. Accords. If she refused, humanity's ranking would drop. If she accepted, she would probably die. But at least it would be entertaining for the species watching. Jenna closed her datapad, stood up, walked to the railing of the observation gallery, and looked down at Krelthax with an expression that could have meant anything. Are you formally challenging Earth under the dominance accords? She asked, her voice calm and clear through the translation system. I am challenging humanity to prove it deserves to be counted among sentient species, Krelthax replied. Send your champion or admit you are nothing more than clever animals. Jenna tilted her head slightly, considering. The smart play was to refuse, to cite some diplomatic reason, to defer to Earth's ambassadorial corps, to let the bureaucrats handle this. That was what she was supposed to do. "I accept," she said. The arena erupted, not cheers, shock. The kind of collective disbelief that came from watching someone make a decision so catastrophically stupid that it broke your brain's ability to process it. Several species immediately began recalculating their understanding of human intelligence levels downward. The Earth diplomatic section, monitoring from a secure location 3 decks away, probably just had a collective stroke. Jenna made her way down to the arena floor, moving through corridors designed for species much larger than her. The automated systems detected her approach and began the pre-combat sequence. Medical scanners confirmed both participants were within acceptable combat parameters. The Vorath delegation confirmed they understood lethal force was authorized. The human delegation, after several seconds of increasingly panicked communication with Earth, confirmed the same. She stepped onto the arena floor. The surface was textured for traction, rated to support impacts measured in megatons. Environmental systems held the atmosphere at standard baseline. Perfect conditions for either a fight or a funeral, depending on how the next few minutes went. Krelthax looked down at her from his considerable height. 3 meters of armored predator regarding 170 centimeters of human with something between contempt and curiosity. "You are very small," he observed, with the tone of someone pointing out that water was wet. "You're very tall," Jenna replied. "Are we going to fight or compare specifications until someone dies of boredom?" The arena made various sounds of surprise. Apparently, humans had sarcasm even when facing imminent death. Several species adjusted their threat assessments accordingly, though mostly in the wrong direction. Krelthax's expression shifted. The mockery drained away, replaced by something more predatory. "You have courage. Foolish courage, but courage. I will make your death quick." "How thoughtful," Jenna said. "I'll try to return the favor." The arena's automated referee announced combat parameters and authorization. Standard proving, ground rules. No weapons beyond natural biological capabilities. Combat continues until submission or incapacitation. Lethal force permitted. Medical intervention available post-combat. "Begin when ready," the referee stated. Krelthax didn't wait for ready. He charged. 400 kilograms of armored predator crossed the arena in less than 2 seconds, moving with speed that shouldn't have been possible for something his size. All 6 limbs came up in a coordinated pattern designed to overwhelm through sheer volume of violence and mass. Jenna moved, not backward, not away, laterally and forward, slipping inside his reach at an angle that destroyed his striking geometry. She was there and gone before those massive limbs could build momentum, moving with the kind of economy that came from understanding that every wasted motion was wasted energy, was death. Krelthax recovered fast, spinning with surprising agility for something built like a biological tank. His secondary arms swept low while his primary arms went high. A pincer movement designed to catch her regardless of direction. She dropped into a slide, passing under the low sweep, rolled, came up already moving. Her hand shot out, struck the soft tissue behind his rear leg joint. Not hard. Precisely. A nerve strike that sent pain signals screaming up his spine. His rear leg buckled slightly. Not enough to drop him. Enough to notice. The crowd's noise changed quality. That had looked suspiciously like technique. Krelthax roared, more irritation than pain, and launched a combination attack with 4 limbs simultaneously. If even one connected, the fight was over. 400 kilograms plus momentum, plus armored striking surface equals human-shaped puddle on arena floor. She wasn't there when the attacks landed. She'd pivoted, used his momentum, guided one massive arm past her body with minimal contact. Just enough touch to redirect, to unbalance, to turn his strength into a liability. He stumbled forward, caught himself, turned with murder in his eyes. This time, he approached more carefully. 6 limbs up in a defensive posture that could transition to offense in fractions of a second. His earlier contempt had been replaced with something resembling professional caution. He'd underestimated her. He wouldn't repeat the mistake. They circled each other like binary stars, each looking for an opening. The crowd watched in silence now, sensing this wasn't the expected execution, but something more interesting. Krelthax feinted with his upper right limb, struck with his middle left, fast, coordinated, the kind of combination that had won dozens of fights. Jenna slipped the feint, parried the real strike with her forearm in a deflection that sent it past her body, and stepped in close. Too close for him to use his reach advantage. Close enough that his size became a disadvantage. Her elbow drove into the soft tissue under his primary arm socket. Her knee struck the inside of his forward leg. Her palm heel smashed into his thorax, where the armor plating was thinnest. None of the strikes alone would have done much. But together, in rapid sequence, they forced him back and off balance. He swung wildly, trying to create space. She gave it to him, stepping back smoothly, already resetting. Krelthax was breathing harder now. The crowd could see it in the movement of his chest plates. This wasn't supposed to be happening. She was smaller, weaker, fragile. She should be losing. He charged again, this time leading with a grapple attempt. If he could get his limbs around her, the fight was over. 6 appendages versus 2. 400 kilograms versus 68. Simple mathematics favoring simple solutions. Jenna didn't avoid the grapple. She moved into it, but at an angle, destroying the geometry he'd set up. His upper limbs closed on empty air. His middle limbs found her, but not the way he'd intended. She was too close, positioned wrong, turning what should have been a dominant position into an awkward tangle. And then she did something that made the entire arena collectively inhale. She grabbed his middle right limb with both hands, dropped her weight, and twisted. The joint lock was textbook perfect. Leverage applied perpendicular to the natural range of motion, her entire body weight committed to the technique, the angle calculated to generate maximum torque with minimum effort. Something in Krelthax's limb made a sound that organic materials really shouldn't make. He roared, genuine pain now, and did what instinct told him to do. He reached for her with his other limbs, trying to overwhelm the technique with raw strength and numbers. She released before he could counter, slipped away like water, and kicked the inside of his rear leg. The same leg she'd struck earlier, the joint that was already compromised. This time it buckled completely. Krelthax went down on one knee, and in that moment of vulnerability, he made a choice that would define the rest of the fight and become legend across the Confederation. He was losing, actually losing. To a creature that massed less than 1/6 of his body weight, that had bones made of calcium instead of reinforced keratin, that should have been nothing more than a speed bump on his way to victory. He couldn't accept it, couldn't process it, couldn't let it stand. He reached out with his primary right limb, moving with desperate speed, and caught her. His hand closed around her hair bun, fingers wrapping around the thick coil of dark hair, and he yanked. The crowd made collective sounds of shock and something approaching embarrassment. Hair pulling was technically legal under proving ground rules, but generally considered beneath the dignity of serious combatants. It was what you did when you were losing and getting desperate, and had abandoned anything resembling honor. Jenna's head snapped back from the force. She stumbled, genuinely off balance for the first time in the fight. Krelthax used the grip as leverage, hauling her off the ground entirely with one massive limb. He held her suspended, dangling from his grip, 3 meters of Vorath warrior holding 68 kilograms of human like a trophy. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction and relief. This was right. This was natural. This was the universe asserting its proper order. "You fought well for prey," he said, his voice carrying through the arena. "But in the end, strength prevails, as it always has, as it always will." He raised his other limbs, preparing to strike while she hung helpless. The fight was over. Everyone knew it. You couldn't defend from that position, couldn't counter, couldn't do anything except wait for the impact that would end you. Except Jenna wasn't trying to escape the grip. She was using it. Her hands found his limb. Her legs came up, wrapped around his massive wrist, and suddenly she wasn't dangling. She was climbing, using his own appendage as a ladder, converting her body weight from a liability into leverage applied directly to his joints. Krelthax tried to shake her off, but she'd locked her legs around his limb in a body triangle that distributed pressure across her entire body. She wasn't trying to muscle him. She was using physics, geometry, biomechanics, the simple fact that joints bend one way and break when forced another. Her arms snaked around his wrist, found the pressure point where nerves clustered close to the surface, and squeezed. His hand spasmed. The grip on her hair loosened just enough. She twisted, rotated her entire body using his limb as an axis, and suddenly she was on his shoulders. Her legs locked around his neck in a triangle choke modified for alien anatomy. Her hands found his head, fingers locating nerve clusters near his eyes. Krelthax thrashed, trying to throw her off, but she'd committed her entire body to the position. Every movement he made, she countered. Every attempt to dislodge her, she absorbed and redirected. She wasn't fighting his strength. She was using it, channeling it, making him fight himself. Her legs tightened around his neck, not crushing, controlling, restricting blood flow to his brain through precisely applied pressure to the major arteries she'd spent 3 months learning the location of in Vorath physiology. Krelthax's movements became more frantic. He reached back with all his remaining functional limbs, trying to grab her, pull her off, do anything to break the hold. But she was positioned perfectly, her body low enough on his shoulders that his limbs couldn't get the angle, high enough that his reach worked against him. She leaned close to where his ear analog was located and spoke quietly, knowing the arena's sensors would pick it up anyway. "Strength doesn't prevail," she said, her voice calm despite the exertion. "Adaptation does. You know what humanity's greatest advantage is? We spent 10,000 years fighting opponents who could think, who could learn, who could adapt and innovate and create new ways to kill us." She adjusted the choke, found a better angle, and Krelthax's movements began to slow. "We didn't fight animals," Jenna continued. "We fought each other, constantly, for resources, territory, ideology, or sometimes just because we were bored. We got really, really good at killing things that could think and plan and fight back." Krelthax tried one more surge of strength, a final desperate attempt to throw her off. She rode it out like a surfer on a wave, adjusted her position fractionally, and tightened the choke with mechanical precision. "You evolved fighting prey that was dumber than you," she said. "We evolved fighting prey that was exactly as smart as us. You learned to be strong. We learned to be creative, to adapt, to take every possible advantage and exploit it without mercy or hesitation." His limbs dropped. His legs buckled. He went down on multiple knees, then forward onto his hands, then finally flat on the arena floor. He was still conscious, technically, but he was done. Completely, utterly done. Jenna maintained the hold for 3 more seconds, making absolutely certain he was finished, then released and rolled clear. She came up in a defensive stance, ready to continue if he somehow recovered. He didn't. The arena was absolutely silent. Jenna stood over Krelthax's prone form, breathing hard, sweat soaking through her uniform, hair half fallen from where he'd grabbed it, and looked up at the thousands of alien beings watching from their galleries and observation decks. "Any other questions about Earth's membership?" she asked. The silence held for another few heartbeats, then shattered like glass. Different species made different sounds. Some were approval, some were shock, some were the alien equivalent of horrified fascination at watching something that shouldn't have happened happen anyway. The betting pools went insane. Fortunes changed hands. Several bookmakers declared bankruptcy on the spot. The Vorath delegation sat frozen, their eyes fixed on their champion lying motionless on the arena floor. He was breathing, conscious, but defeated by something that should have been beneath his notice. Medical teams entered, scanners active, checking both combatants. Jenna waved them off. She had bruising, some pulled muscles, and her scalp hurt where her hair had been grabbed, but nothing serious. Nothing that wouldn't heal. Krelthax required more attention. His limb was damaged from the joint lock, though regeneration therapy would fix it within a week. His pride would take considerably longer. Jenna walked off the arena floor without ceremony. She moved through the crowd like water, species that massed 3 times her weight, instinctively giving way. She made it back to the human observation section, where Earth's diplomatic corps was waiting, with expressions ranging from horror to grudging respect to panic about the political implications. "You weren't supposed to fight," the senior diplomat said, though his tone suggested he was more concerned with procedure than outcome. "He challenged Earth's standing," Jenna replied, accepting a water container from support staff. Seemed worth responding to. "You could have died." "Could have, didn't. That's how this system works, isn't it?" The diplomat opened his mouth, closed it, and apparently decided that arguing with someone who just choked out a Vorath champion was not productive use of time. Down in the arena, Krelthax was being helped to his feet by medical staff. He looked up at the observation deck, his eyes finding Jenna with predator precision. Then he raised all 6 limbs in the Vorath gesture of respect. The salute reserved for worthy opponents, for those who'd earned acknowledgement through combat. Jenna saw it, nodded once, and returned the gesture as best she could, with only 2 arms. Word spread through the Confederation faster than light-speed communications. Humans were weak, yes. Fragile, absolutely. But dangerous in ways that species measuring everything in terms of physical capability hadn't anticipated. They fought with their brains as much as their bodies. They adapted in real time. They found weaknesses and exploited them without mercy. They'd spent their entire evolutionary history fighting opponents who could think and plan and innovate, which made them uniquely suited to combat against predictable strength-based fighters. They were, in their own peculiar way, terrifying. The conference continued, but Earth had 23 formal challenges withdrawn immediately. 15 more were rescinded after consultation with species who'd witnessed the fight. 4 went forward, and Earth won all 4, though none as dramatically as Jenna's victory over Krelthax. The Vorath, to their credit, took the loss with more grace than expected. Krelthax spent a week in regeneration, then requested a meeting with Jenna. They talked for hours about combat philosophy, tactical adaptation, and the various ways humanity had historically killed things much larger than themselves. He left the meeting looking thoughtful and disturbed in equal measure. "Your species shouldn't exist," he told her. "Everything about you says you should have been prey. Should have been eaten." "We were," Jenna agreed. "For a long time. Then we figured out tools, fire, tactics, teamwork. We learned that the biggest predator still needs to sleep, and a rock to the head works regardless of size difference. That is genuinely horrifying. That's humanity. We didn't evolve to be strong. We evolved to be too stubborn to stay dead and too smart to fight fair." Krelthax made a sound approximating laughter. "I understand now why your species waited 30 years to participate. You wanted us to underestimate you. We wanted to understand what we were dealing with," Jenna corrected. "We watched. We learned. We figured out how everyone fights, what they value, where their weaknesses are. That's what humans do. We survive long enough to figure out how to beat whatever's trying to kill us." The story became legend. Not the sanitized official version, but the real one passed around recreation facilities and bars across Confederation space. The time a human 1/6 the size of her opponent choked him out after he grabbed her by the hair thinking he'd won. The Confederation continued, as it had for 9,000 years. Species competing, cooperating, occasionally fighting to settle disputes. But now everyone was more careful around humans, more respectful, more aware that size and strength weren't the only measurements of danger. Jenna returned to Earth eventually. Filed reports, completed debriefings, returned to training the next generation of combat specialists who might represent humanity in future proving grounds. She didn't think of herself as special. She'd done a job using skills developed over a lifetime. The fact that it involved choking out an alien warrior 3 times her size was just another day at work. But somewhere in the Confederation databases and collective memory, there was a new understanding about Earth. Humans were weak, fragile, broke easily. But they were absolutely not to be underestimated. Because humanity didn't fight with strength. They fought with everything else. And in a universe that had spent 9,000 years assuming might made right, that was revolutionary enough to change everything. The Dominance Accords continued governing interspecies relations. But now, buried in the footnotes and amendments and revised threat assessments, was a new understanding that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. Physical strength was just one variable in the equation of combat. And species that optimized for only one variable tended to lose to species that optimized for everything else. Humanity had spent its entire existence being the physically weakest thing in any given situation. They'd compensated by becoming the most creative, adaptable, and ruthlessly efficient fighters the galaxy had ever seen. They'd turned weakness into an advantage by never, ever fighting fair. And that, as it turned out, was the most dangerous thing of all.